Hello, I'm Simon. Welcome back to the workshop. Now today I'm going to be making a tool tote. Now, I don't really need a tool tote, but I thought it would be a nice thing to make. My original plans were to make a tool tote that was very strong and rugged, that could have a lid on the top and I could double it up as a stool. But I then started iterating that idea and ended up with the concept of a household handy, which is something I'm going to make on another day. And that then changed how the tool tote developed, because rather than it being sturdy and something strong enough that you could stand on, I've moved to something that will be lightweight and easy to move around. So as an example of that, I selected these pieces of scrap wood for the corners of my tool tote, and you can see they're pretty thick 32mm square boards. They were actually chair legs, and these would have been certainly strong enough for even the heaviest of people, but they weigh a ton. So I'm actually going to be splitting these boards in half, and what we'll end up with is a quarter of the weight, and weight is a key part of this build. I want to try and keep it sturdy but as lightweight as possible. So let's get tinkering. Now there's a lot more wood here than I actually need. I've got some 1/8 of an inch ply, it's 3-ply, it's about 3mm thick. I've got these chair legs, some other parts. These are actually the front legs of a chair and one of the side braces, and I have this, which is off an old tripod. Now, as I've already said, I'm going to use a couple of these to make the foundation of the tool tote. These are going to make the handle, and then this will be used for the trim, and then the sides and the bottom are going to be this sheet material. Now you can see there was a little bit of damage when these legs were disassembled from the chair, and you can see also that they've all got some metal hardware in them. Luckily I don't need the full length of one of these pieces, so I'm going to use this one, which is the most damaged, because I think I'm going to probably cut it about here in any case. That will get rid of all this damage and the metal insert, and I'm hoping that I can actually get all 4 pieces that I need out of one leg, and then the rest can go back into my stockpile for another day. Now I'm going to cut the length of this board by eye. It's about a foot or 30cm. I'll rip this board roughly to size using the bandsaw, and then I'll tidy it up using the planer thicknesser. And there are a few other parts that I need to dimension the same, so I might as well cut them all now on the bandsaw and then use the same settings on the thickness sander to get them all exactly the same. So I'm not working from a plan other than the one that's in my head, but I'm thinking that I want this to be big enough to hold a hammer comfortably along with my other tools, and it feels to me that this sort of size feels about right. That is 15 inches or 38cm, or it's about an arm's length, and it's 8 inches or 20cm, or about the length of your thumb to your finger. These old tripod legs are going to end up being some trim around the top and bottom of the tote, just to make it look nicer, and also just to protect those top and bottom surfaces a little. But before I can use them, I just need to cut them down so that they're square profile, and I'll then clean them up using the thickness planer as well. Now I've done some calculations and made a few small test cuts, and now if I run this board up the table saw, flip it round and then run it up again, I should end up with a groove that's 4 to 4.1mm in width, which will be just right for slipping over the sides of the 4mm ply that I've got to make the sides and the base of this tool tote. So let's recap where we are. We have all these pieces, which are going to be plenty to make the handle and the corners of the tool tote. We then have these pieces, which I've put a groove down the centre, and the grooves down the centre so that it fits nicely on the board like so. I can glue that in place and give the board a nice clean edge. Now, when I make things, I tend to use arbitrary units, and I said earlier that I wanted it to be 15 inches to fit this hammer. Well, the board in this direction is 14 3/4, just over. So I could stick with my 15 inches and cut the board in this direction, so lengthways that way 15 inches and up 8, but I'd end up needing to use 3 of these boards, and that seems a bit of a waste for 1/4 of an inch. The hammer still fits in nicely, so I'm going to stick with the width that the board currently is, which is 14 3/4, and I'll then be able to make my bottom and my 2 sides from this board, and then I'll be able to make the rest from the other board. So this board will be the base and the 2 sides. One of the sides is actually going to be lower than the other side, that will be the front. So I'm going to cut this piece into 3 new boards, and I'll cut the 2 end pieces from this sheet. The side boards need to be shaped, and they're the same width as the base. And I'll just tidy them up on the bench sander. Whilst I could cut these miters on the table saw, I've decided to just cut them by hand using a junior hacksaw with a wood blade. So I'm just going to use butt joints to glue it all together. The glue will be plenty strong enough. So this is going to go here like this, but I need more surface area than I'm getting from just this edge because it's only 3mm ply. So I'm going to add a spacer in just to help out. Now, to get this spacer to the right size, I also need to leave a gap here so that when the base goes in, there's space for the base. I'll now glue this side up. So I've glued up one side and I've temporarily put the bottom in place just to keep the sides parallel while it dries. This piece will form the trim on the top sides of the tote box. Now I'm going to start by just trimming the end off and then I'll cut it to size. But it's a little too long for the bandsaw throat, so I cut it by hand. As you probably know, I volunteer at my local men's shed. And I always say to the newbies that haven't done a lot of woodworking to have a clamping strategy, to do a dry fit before you add any glue at all. Of course, they never listen to me, and often I'm coming over and rescuing a build where they've put all the glue on, but not thought about how they're going to clamp it. So what I'd like to say is always make sure you have a clamping strategy. Do a dry fit, clamp it all up before taking it apart again and doing a fit with the glue. You'll thank me for it. There's a few little details I just need to finish off on the trim. While I'm waiting for things to dry, I'll work on the handle. So this doesn't look quite finished yet. I think I need something on these corners here. So I'm going to make some trim that will fill these corners and make it look a bit nicer. Now something I need to bear in mind is this corner comes out, but this one doesn't. I should have thought about that when I cut this piece. So this corner here is going to need to have to come up and also fill in this little extra bit there so that it all looks neat and tidy. I've got some of this U-shape profile left over from the build, and I'm now going to cut this to make it into an L-shaped profile, which would be ideal for doing those corners. Now this is a non-through cut, so I can't use the crown guard or the riving knife, so I've taken those off, and I'm going to be especially careful about not letting my fingers get anywhere near that blade. I'll do a little bit of tidying up with the chisel because I hadn't set the blade quite right. It's just a tiny bit out it was. I can now start sanding all of the surfaces so they feel nice and are smooth to the touch. So I was going to fit these little rubber feet to the bottom, but I've realised that they're shallower than the lip that I've got on the box. And also, because this is very thin wood, if I try to screw them to the bottom, I would go straight through the board. So I thought, well, that's okay, I could just glue them, but that doesn't really solve the problem of them being a little bit too small. So I've got this piece of board, which is just about the right sort of size, and I'm going to fit it in here, and I'll glue it to this board, and then I can screw these to the bottom, and it'll work out okay. Now to fix the handle, I made some of these little discs on the lathe. They've got a dowel the other side, and the idea was I was going to put these in the side, hole in the handle, fix across there. But I'm now having second thoughts. I'm not sure that this dowel is really going to be strong enough. But I quite like the idea of these discs, and I don't really want a screw to show. So now what I'm thinking of doing is cutting this dowel off drilling out a small recess in this and then using these metal threaded inserts which can be glued into the handle, screwed from the other side, and then these cover the screw so that it can't be seen. And now I'm ready to give it a full coat of Danish oil. Now I can see a few little blemishes where I need to sand down a little bit because I've got PVA glue on the surface. So I'll redo those and then I'll re-Danish oil it. Well, this tool tote is, to all intents and purposes, finished. I really like this feature of a low front, which gives me really good access to the contents of the tool tote. And in use, I'm finding that I'm now taking all the tools that I could possibly think that I might need into the house when I've got a job to do, rather than just taking the essentials and inevitably having to make several trips back to the workshop to get extra tools. If you know anyone that you think might like this video, then please share it with them using the share button below. If you've enjoyed this video, then please leave a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more content like this, then please subscribe. I'm thinking of doing an update to this video that'll include some accessorization of this tool tote to make it a little bit more organized for those tools that I'm commonly carrying. So look out for that, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.